Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Valley Water Landscape Summit. It's a pleasure to have all of you here with us today virtually. Maybe next year we'll be in person, but for now, virtually. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Valley Water Landscape Summit. It's a pleasure to have all of you here today with us virtually. Maybe next year we'll be doing this in person. My name is Brian Boyer. I'm the Valley Water Landscape Committee Chair, and I will be your moderator for the event today. I also serve as the golf course superintendent at Cinnabar Hills Golf Club, where I've been here for 16 years now. Water conservation has become a way of life for us since 2013, saving over 25% since the call to action. Outside of golf and water conservation, I noted in my bio that I have a small obsession with running, and I've joked with Karen Coppin in the past where I do ultra marathons, 32 miles, 50 miles, 100-mile races, and have a few of those scheduled for this year, and gives me lots of time to think about water conservation and how we go about being better. And for here, we're going to go to slide number 3, please. Next. The Landscape Summit is an annual event hosted by Valley Water to bring together the landscape community to learn about water issues in the county and California as a whole and how water relates to the landscape industry. Before we begin today, I would like to go over some of the Zoom logistics with you all, although most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Zoom. I'm probably the least familiar of all of you. Fortunately, but if you have questions for the speakers today, please type your questions in the Q&A box by clicking the Q&A icon in the bottom middle. For general comments today, you can use your chat box if you just want to say hi to everyone that's on the call today. If you need to adjust your audio settings, please click the audio settings on the bottom left of your screen. If for whatever reason you need to leave the webinar, click the red leave button on the bottom right of your screen. Next slide, please. For professionals who need CEUs today, the Landscape Summit also qualifies as CEUs for the Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper certification, Rescape qualification, and the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. Please contact your certifying organization directly for more information. Next slide. All right, to get the most out of this virtual event today, we have a few tips for you all. 1, remember to block off your calendar so you can focus on the presentation. 2, if you need a break, feel free to stand up, stretch, walk around, give your eyes a break from the screen. Keep yourself energized by having snacks and water nearby. If you have any tech questions today, please feel free to email linda@calwep.org. Her email is also posted in the chat box. Next slide, please. All right, now that we have covered the logistics for today's Zoom meeting, Landscape Summit, let's jump in with some polls. Question number 1 for the first poll. Tell us which of the following best describes you or your employer. Contractor, designer, architect, maintenance, nursery, irrigation, landscape, master gardener, student, nonprofit, water, other. While you're filling out this poll, let's take a look at the agenda for the Landscape Summit. First, we have Valley Water staff will provide an update on the state of Valley Water and an overview of Valley Water's programs. Next, we have a very interesting keynote about building a resilient Silicon Valley. Afterwards, we'll take a short interlude to hear some poetry, and then we're going to jump into presentations about state laws that you should be aware of, the Bloom campaign from the California Native Plant Society, and tips and tricks for native plant maintenance. Okay, let's discuss the poll results. Ashley, can you join me on the stage and turn your mic and camera on, please? Ashley is a senior water conservation specialist for Valley Water. Welcome.
All right, welcome. All right, so it looks like we've got a good mix of people, lots of master gardeners I see in there, and folks from water agencies. What else do we have on there, Ryan?
Master gardeners always represent.
It looks like pretty good split too between landscape designers, architects, and maintenance folks, as well as some nursery. So great. I'm glad we have a good mixture of folks.
Yeah, it is a good group today, and I'm surprised to see maintenance, the maintenance percentage as high as it is this year. That's really good to see. So let's move on to our second poll question of the day. Which of the following is your favorite way to save water at home? You got a few selections there, all on your screen. While you guys are all filling that out, some of, maybe not necessarily my favorite, but my most effective ways of saving water here at the golf course is by working the soil, whether it's cultivation, calcium, organic fertilizers. The key to water conservation for us is through the soil. One of the most exciting ways for us to save water this year is we're going to be utilizing drone technology on a daily basis to help identify our wet and dry spots to save as much water as we possibly can this year. So it's going to be an exciting year for us here at the golf course. And I'm looking forward to seeing these poll results. If I can bring back Ashley, if you can turn your camera and mic back on. Let's see the results coming in. Other ways that we save water out here is by amending or changing our water pH. Oh, here we go. What's this?
Well, in true, I wouldn't expect less from the landscape committee, but landscape summit, but planting native plants is a strong winner in there.
Yeah. Sure. Glad to see it's taking shorter showers and not no showers. That's fantastic. Finding and fixing leaks is a big one. I know there's been some statistics out there of what cities annually waste from leaks.
Well, awesome. Thank you all.
Yeah, great participation. Thank you. Okay, well, that wraps up the polls for now. And we're going to move on to the board of directors welcomed by Director Richard Santos. Director Santos was elected to the Valley Water Board in 2000. Which was just prior to his retirement from San Jose Fire Department, where he served as fire captain for 33 years. He was on the board of directors as vice chair in 2004, 2009, 2017, and as chair in 2005, 2010, and 2018. He's been the board's liaison to the landscape committee since 2001, and he was a big proponent of setting up this landscape summit our first year. Director Santos, can you please join me on the virtual stage?
Wait, hold on.
Yeah, good morning, Brian. Thank you very much. We're having a little bit of technical work here, but we're doing fine. And of course, thank you for that introduction. I'm Richard Santos, Director of Santa Clara Valley Water District. And it's been a pleasure for hosting this for 7 years. It's been very successful and beneficial. So before I go on, I believe we have Director Naishua, my cohort here in the Landscaping Committee, and we also have Director Linda Lazat. If there's anyone else I missed, let me know. With that, I know I missed the having breakfast in the morning together and later on having a little lunch. It's always been so nice. Unfortunately, we got to go through this, and if we all follow the rules, we'll get out of this thing soon, I hope, with this C-19. The idea behind the summit is to get input and ideas from you, the landscape and professional community, on how to work together to make conservation a California way of life. Because you're in the field, working with the public, your ideas are so valuable to us. A good example of how important the collaboration is to Valley Water is how Santa Clara County is working to meet water use demands during the drought, and how residents continue to save water and have made conservation a California way of life. The Landscaping Committee played a key role in this, and your efforts are very much appreciated. We are very excited about the Landscaping Summit because we have some wonderful guest speakers coming up who will help provide you with the tools you need to make Santa Clara County a leader in some sustainable water efficiency landscaping. On behalf of the board of directors, we really appreciate all you volunteers, people helping out to reduce water reduction. So we really appreciate it. Landscaping Committee has been a joy for me. I've served over 20 years. I really appreciate everybody's efforts. So with that, thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Director, for the warm welcome. Next up on our presentation is the State of the Valley's Water by Ms. Melanie Richardson, Assistant Chief Executive Officer of Integrated Water Management, Valley Water. She will talk to us about the State of the Valley's Water, and she's the Assistant Chief Executive. She's been with the district for 32 years, and she's also a registered civil engineer. Melanie, can you please turn your mic on and camera and join us on the virtual stage?
Yes. Okay, well, thank you very much, Brian, for the introduction, and thank you, Director Santos, for kicking this off this morning. I'm Melanie Richardson. I'm the Assistant Chief Executive Officer here at Valley Water, and I wanted to thank all of you very much for joining us today at this Landscape Committee. Next slide, please. So I think most of you know that we are in our third year of drought here. And last year was actually California's third driest year on record. At the time, we were in an extreme state of drought, and now we've been reduced to severe. However, the battle isn't over. I think as most of you know, we had a bit of rainfall in December, and we thought that was a great start, and it was a great start. But in January, we had a completely dry year, and so far into February, we're seeing no rain or no forecast throughout the rest of February. So unfortunately, the snowpack, which provides about half of Santa Clara County's imported water, has dwindled to less than normal. It at one time was above normal, but it's down to less than normal again. And accordingly, we received low imported water allocations this year. One of the consequences of us receiving low imported water allocations, because we use about 50% of our water from imported sources, is we begin to see our groundwater levels declining. And that is problematic because when groundwater levels decline, it can cause subsidence. And that's when the ground permanently sinks. It has happened before in the El Viso area, and it can cause a significant damage, like it can damage infrastructure, and it is irreversible. So that's something we really focus on, is doing everything we can to keep our groundwater levels at a sustainable level. So back to this drought, our board was very quick to act, and on June 9th actually declared a water shortage emergency. That was followed by the county proclaiming a drought, and then the state, including our county, in their statewide drought proclamation after that. So kudos to our board for stepping out in front and getting this going. Next slide, please. In addition to the statewide problem, we have an added risk here in Santa Clara County in that our largest reservoir, Anderson Dam, has been drained for approximately 10 years. And that was due to an order by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, to drain the reservoir back in February 2020. They made this order. We had to comply by the end of the year 2020. And we have to keep it down to dead pool, which is essentially, I think, about 3,000 acre feet in the reservoir, until such time as we get all of the retrofit completed, and that is approximately for 10 years. So we're at another disadvantage in our county in that we don't have access to our largest reservoir during this drought condition. Next slide, please. Okay, so I did talk about the fact that we are now in a severe drought. We were actually in an extreme drought. We've dropped down a little bit due to those rains that we received in December. However, things have not looked up since we had that record rainfall in December. I talked about the fact that we have seen no measurable rainfall since then, and we don't see any in the forecast. So it appears that we're headed towards drought conditions for this year. Next slide, please. So we, Valley Water, are both a state and federal water contractor. We receive water from both the State Water Project as well as the Central Valley Project. We're the only agency in the state to get both sources but unfortunately our allocations in 2021 were very low. And in 2022, where it's being projected so far by the State Water Project that we will get about 15%, which is equivalent to about 15,000 acre feet of water. And so far from the Central Valley Project, we're being allocated 6,000 acre feet for the months of January and February. That is pretty low. And semi-tropic water banking, we will have the capability of taking up to 31,500 acre feet of water. But all of this is not adequate, and therefore we need to go out on the open market and pursue emergency transfers. And we are doing that. We have been doing that. The issue is they're 4 times more expensive now than in normal years. So this is going to cost a bit more money to have to go out and secure these emergency transfers. Next, please. So really, the focus of this is that the groundwater basin is really the key for us, and that all of the actions we take really center around protecting our valuable groundwater basin. For those of you that don't know, we have our largest bank exists underground, and we store a lot of local water in those groundwater basins. But not having adequate supplies, puts us at risk to have declining groundwater levels, which I indicated earlier can result in subsidence. In addition, in South County, groundwater is the only source of drinking water, as they don't have treatment plants. So it's even more risk in that area. Next slide, please. So a lot of people want to know, how does Santa Clara County use water? I mean, what is our largest source of water? Well, in Santa Clara County, the major water use is in residential, and about half of an average resident's water is used outdoors. And that's probably why you see the focus of our water conservation campaigns on outdoor water use, because that's a relatively easy way, I guess, to cut down on your water without causing any public health and safety issues. So we've really been focusing on that. And I just want to give kudos to the landscape community, who has played a really large role in helping us to reduce irrigation throughout this drought. That's it. Our next slide. Sorry. So we have been very active in responding to this drought. Some of the key actions we have taken is we have doubled the landscape rebate program. We have increased our messaging. You might have seen signs around like the ones that's shown in this picture. We've reduced deliveries to our water retailers. And we've also reduced imported water releases into our creeks and ponds that provide recharge. For example, the one that's right here at our headquarters building. If you look at that pond, it has very minimal, if no water. However, the only place that we're ensuring that we continue to put groundwater recharge into facilities is South County, because they rely solely on their groundwater. Next slide, please. We have an extensive public outreach campaign. This is just one example showing an outreach campaign at our Silicon Valley Advanced Purification Center. We're trying to get out to the public through the media, through public presentations like this one, and also through education programs. Oh, and one quick thing is we do have some nice new ads that feature the 49ers and the Sharks that are helping us to get this message out. Next slide, please. So overall, since we've made the call for conservation back in June of 2021, we have seen an 8% cumulative savings from June through December, which is good. I mean, it's better than the statewide average. I believe the statewide average is about 6%. And here in the Bay Area or in Santa Clara County, we've done better than the statewide average. So that's great. But if you look at this slide, it might be a little concerning that we popped up a bit in December to 3% increased use. But that is really kind of an anomaly, because we're comparing against 2019. In December of 2019 was an extremely low water use month. And it's I think it was the third lowest water use December on record. So that was a difficult bar to hit, and we knew that was the case. However, we're focusing on the long-term cumulative, and we are doing well. We are at 8%. Next slide, please. So what successes have we had so far? Well, I think several. We have seen a drop in our water retailer use compared to 2019. We have secured additional imported water supplies. We actually did a great job this year securing additional supplies on the open market, which led us to actually slow the groundwater level decline. So we did not see the decline in groundwater levels that we expect, and it was primarily due to our aggressive pursuit of this additional imported water. And then we saw significant increased participation in our water conservation programs. Next slide, please. So what are our next steps? Obviously, this is a dynamic situation, and we have to continue to monitor it, and take action based on data we see. So we are continuing to assess the drought condition as we move into spring of 2022. And if it continues, which it appears that it's going to, we may consider pursuing additional emergency water supplies and increasing the percentage of water use reduction from 15 to something more than that. But once again, that will be based on just the data we see as we move through 2022. Next slide, please. So purified water. We're talking about a lot of short-term solutions that we can do to offset this drought, but looking long-term, we really have to invest more in purified water. And for those of you who are not familiar with purified water is actually advanced treated recycled water. We treat it to a higher level than normal recycled water through reverse osmosis, microfiltration, and ultraviolet radiation to get it to a drinking water standard. We actually have a plant right now, an 8 million gallon per day plant that's located near the San Jose Santa Clara wastewater plant that is allowing us to test this type of water, although we're not using it for drinking at this time. We're using it now to blend it with the traditional recycled water and to get a higher quality of water. But looking forward in the future, we're looking at actually using this water to recharge into our groundwater basins, which is called indirect potable reuse, and perhaps in the future to discharge directly into pipelines when regulations come out to that effect. And our board in December of 2021 made this decision to move forward with the next step on purified water with the city of Palo Alto. So we are pursuing a partnership project with them that will actually provide water that we will recharge into our groundwater basins, and it will become another source of water for us over the long term. Next, please. And that wraps it up, and myself and staff stand open for questions.
All right, thank you, Melanie. So I've been monitoring the chats. Looks like we've got a couple questions. So first question is looks like it's almost a three-part question. Is water import a sustainable solution? Aren't there other agencies also running out of water in the Southwest? Will we have to import water from further and further away?
I'm going to see if we have anybody from our imported water group on here. If not, I might ask Kirsten if she
Kirsten
could.
is on.
I'm sorry, who?
Kirsten is on. I don't know. I don't think we have anyone from our imported water group on as a panelist.
Kirsten, can you take that question, please?
Sure. So it is true that, everyone will be looking to the same snowpack for imported water. And that is why we have, we're trying to invest in projects that help us diversify where our water comes from, including the Purified Water Project that Melanie mentioned, and increased conservation, and also regional projects where we could have, more connections to other water agencies as well. So we have a more flexible way of receiving our water. And importing it from further and further away is likely cost prohibitive. And that's why we are starting to invest in locally controlled drought-proof water supplies.
Okay, I saw another question that came in the chat. I'm wondering why the retrofits of Anderson will take so long.
I'll go ahead and take that question. So Initially, we scheduled this project as a 5-year retrofit project. And for this particular dam, we have to take it all the way down to its clay core and then rebuild it. So it does take several seasons to do that. However, back in February of 2020, when the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, who is the lead federal agency, ordered that we drain the reservoir and move forward and expedite construction of a low-level outlet tunnel, that completely changed the way we do the project. And we've now had to split it into 2 projects, the first being what we called the FERC Order Compliance Project, which addresses all these issues that FERC ordered, and the second being the full Anderson Dam retrofit. That prolonged the project from 5 years to 10 years. The primary reason for that is to ensure safety throughout the construction. When you're taking down a dam and putting it back up, you have to adhere to safety standards every step of the way, because you have to ensure that you don't flood those folks downstream, and you have to ensure that you can provide all of the environmental benefits needed throughout that construction. It does set atop Coyote Creek, which is a creek that has federal endangered steelhead. And so we have to provide systems and projects to keep those steelhead thriving throughout the construction of this dam. And all of those factors just cause it to take about 10 years, not to mention we have 13 regulatory agencies overseeing this project.
Thank you. We had a question about coming in and said, what will happen to city street trees? I'm assuming that means, what will happen to, the irrigation may be needed for city street trees with calls for reduction.
Kirsten, can you take that?
That's a good question. We leave that obviously up to cities to decide. I know that some of them, focus on more drought tolerant species that can reach the more shallow groundwater, and others might have recycled water to water them. So there's a variety of ways. Obviously, supporting trees is super important, for overall sustainability and climate change. And I think, Ashley, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the landscape guide that we did related to trees.
Yeah, and actually, I'll be going over our landscape guide, our sustainable landscape guide later in my presentation. And then we've also partnered with Canopy to offer information about tree care. And so we do definitely encourage folks. We don't want people to stop irrigating their trees. Prioritize that over maybe over lawns. Okay, we've got a couple more minutes. I see 2 questions that are kind of related to recycled water, so I'm going to combine those. One question is from a group who wanted to use recycled water in their community garden, but San Jose indicated that rules for using recycled water made its use impractical. Any work being done to address regulatory hurdles to use recycled water more readily? And another question inquired about why residential sites aren't able to use recycled water.
Would you like me to answer those?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, like the question from about the purple pipe in the community garden. So wastewater agencies in our county, and we have 4 of them, Palo Alto Regional Plant, Sunnyvale, San Jose, Santa Clara, and the South County Wastewater Authority. They produce the recycled water, and we have been helping them since, many of them since the 70s, some of them a little later, but anyway, we have a long history of supporting recycled water, but we don't typically build those pipes. I mean, we do it in some occasions, but extending it to community gardens can be extremely cost prohibitive. For the project that Melanie described earlier, for the Purified Water Project, we will need a 20-mile pipeline through a very urbanized area to get the water to our recharge ponds so that everyone can use it, that uses groundwater. And it's half the cost of the project. It's extremely expensive to lay pipes in the streets in an urban environment. And so it can become cost prohibitive. In terms of regulatory hurdles, yeah, we are working on those along with our wastewater partners to get a wider use for recycled water. So definitely working on that. And thank you for that question. And I see there's another one on desalination, if you want me to answer that quickly.
Yep.
Yes, we are definitely considering desalination, but it does sound easier than it actually is. It's the same technology as the purified wastewater, treated wastewater, but actually has to remove more things because the seawater is saltier, and we're also at the bay and there can be environmental hurdles, but we have various partnerships regionally to look at desalination because, like I said earlier, developing locally controlled drought-proof water supplies is extremely important. And we have considered sea level rise for the purified water projects as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Richardson, for a very informative presentation. Thank you, Kirsten, for jumping in and helping with some of the questions. Next up, we have Ashley Shannon, who will provide Valley Water's program updates and accomplishments since our last summit. You've already been introduced to her with the Q&As and the poll questions, but she's a water supply planning and she's in the water supply planning and conservation unit for 9 years now. She runs Valley Water's landscape rebate program and agricultural mobile irrigation lab, as well as other programs. And like many of you on the Zoom today, she's an avid gardener and a retired landscape designer herself. So Ashley, can you please go ahead and turn on your microphone and camera? And as she joins us, just a reminder, if you do have questions today, on the bottom middle of your screen, go ahead and put in your questions in the question box, not the chat box. Thank you. Do we have Ashley?
Yes, thank you. We can move to the next slide. Well, thanks for the introduction and thank you all for joining us. As Brian mentioned, I'm a senior water conservation specialist at Valley Water. I run our landscape rebate program and our agricultural mobile irrigation lab program, as well as, do a few other things too. I'm pretty busy. Welcome, and I'm excited to talk to you all about a little bit about what we've been doing over the past year since our last summit. Next slide, please. All right, so last year I gave a pretty in-depth presentation detailing the programs that we offer and going through the steps to participate and what those programs entail. So I won't be doing an in-depth presentation on those today. But I do quickly want to highlight before I move into kind of what we've changed, what we've accomplished, challenges that we've had for the next year. I do want to quickly highlight the programs that we offer, both indoor and outdoor. So we offer, the whole spectrum. So rebates, free services, free devices to folks. Many of you in the landscape community probably mostly work with us on the ones that I've highlighted in green. So our landscape rebate program and our gray water rebate, which offer rebate incentives to help people make their landscapes more efficient and to install alternative water sources. And then also our outdoor survey program, both for commercial landscapes, which I'll discuss a little bit later, and then also our program for our outdoor survey that we have for residential sites, our Waterwise outdoor survey program. Lastly, you may have been involved with, familiar with our water waste program. So we have a program aimed at allowing folks within our community to report when they see water waste, and then we'll act on that. We'll go out, and this is an educational program. It's not, we're not issuing fines, but we're going out to educate folks. And so we're finding, going out to either the homes or the businesses, and we're letting them know, like, hey, someone noticed that a sprinkler was broken, or that a valve box was leaking. I actually sent one of those in this weekend, a leaky valve box at a commercial site. And so it's a way to inform people and let them know about leaks and problems that they might not otherwise encounter. So all of our programs, and we have a link at the end, you can visit at watersavings.org for more information. And so let's move on. I have a lot to go over. I just want to highlight what we've been doing since last year. Next slide. All right, so as 2021 continued to be a very busy year for us. In addition to challenges from COVID, which we were still experiencing, as Melanie mentioned, we also found ourselves in a severe drought. So, as she also mentioned, we ended up increasing our rebate rate in July of 2021 from $1 to $2 per square foot for our lawn conversion rebate. This is in response to the drought and funding that we received from Measure S funding. So the residential cap for the rebate program was increased from $2,000 to $3,000. Those rates are more in some cost sharing areas, so definitely check in with the city, whatever city you're working in with your client, the rates may be different. Our commercial rate stayed at $50,000 and is more in some areas also that offer cost sharing. With this increase in the rebate rate combined with drought and more information about our programs, we saw an exponential jump in participation. So next slide. This slide shows you our participation rate in 2021, which is the orange line on here, compared to 2020. So as you can see, when the drought was declared, actually, when our upcoming increase in our rebate rate was declared around April, you can see a spike in applications submitted. People submitted their applications and then we held on to them until the increase in July. But you'll see in July, we saw a huge spike. So in July alone, we received only over 650 applications compared to the previous year where it was just over 100. So with this sudden increase came with it, challenges, and we experienced a significant backlog because we just couldn't get out to sites fast enough. And then combined with COVID, we didn't have staff who were able to answer our hotline live. And so we worked, we worked hard to overcome these backlogs. We doubled our intern staff, so we moved up from about 6 and now we have 12. We shifted Valley Water staff to prioritize application processing. So we put other projects on hold. We moved people from other departments to accommodate the influx. We implemented a new hotline system, issued new phones, and was able to redirect calls so we can now answer those live. And we also found creative ways to move people through the process. So we started using Google Earth as a tool to measure landscapes, those that were easy to measure without a tree coverage, tree canopy. We used that method to measure those. And eventually we started allowing self-guided measurements so that customers that were in a big hurry and couldn't wait for a scheduled on-site inspection could get through faster. We're now back to all on-site inspections. And this is because in February, we were finally able to bring on a contractor to help take on all of our pre-inspections. And so they actually just started scheduling. Last week was their first week that they were out on site. Within the first week or so, they had 50 sites, nearly 50 sites signed up for pre-inspections. And so if you're working with us, you might see now that our inspections are being scheduled by a contractor and they're coming out and doing those. But thank you all for your continued support of the Landscape Rebate Program and for your patience as we work our way through this busy period. Next slide. Also last year, in April, we launched our e-cart. So we've always offered water conservation devices to our residences, and people would give us a call or shoot us an email when they would like something, we would mail it out to them. In April, we launched, and we were very proud to launch this new online e-cart where it made people very easy to just click and add to cart, a free item, and we would mail it out to them. But we were shocked at how popular it was. So we received over 370 orders within the first 10 days. And between April and December, we received nearly 5,500 orders compared to 2020, where we received 43. So, this quickly became apparent that Valley Water couldn't meet the demand on our own. We were experiencing backlogs of up to 6 weeks. And we needed to find help with this. So we brought our contractor on in November to help with this as well. And within 2 or 3 days, they were able to bring her down our wait time to just 3 weeks. And now it's the wait time is eliminated. So we're very excited. This has been extremely popular. And there's a few landscape items on there in our cart, hose nozzles, a little soil moisture meter, and educational materials. Next slide. We also launched our Purified Water campaign. Valley Water launched the Purified Water campaign to highlight how purified water can help ensure Santa Clara County has a drought-proof, safe, and sustainable supply now and into the future. This is one of the ads that you may have seen recently, and as Melanie mentioned, we also have other ads that are feature Sharks players and 49er players. So Linda, if you can play this quick ad for everyone.
I've been living in Santa Clara County my whole life. I know droughts happen. That's why me and my family are doing our part to conserve. Fix the leak! Here at Valley Water, they're also doing their part to create a whole new local water supply. They're planning on recycling and purifying water so we have more drinking water, a process that is done in other parts of the world.
And even at the space station.
Valley Water is protecting our water supply from impacts of climate change and extreme droughts. Conservation and purified water, together, our future is drought-proof.
Oh, thank you. Next slide.
I've been living in Santa.
All right, and I'm realizing I'm going a little bit over time, so I'm or getting close to that, so I'm gonna speed up my pace a little bit. But we're really excited to announce that we created a sustainable landscape guides. This is a product that we worked with G3 Green Gardeners Group on to customize. You may have seen other versions of it, but this one we were able to customize for our county. So add, plants specific to our county. We worked with a wonderful technical advisory committee, which included members of our landscape committee, Valley Water staff, and we had a master gardeners rep on there as well. This offers, a full gamut of information about how to, use a watershed approach to landscaping. Next slide. This publication is right now, it's available digitally. I don't know why that was a hard word for me to say, but you can use it. It's formatted to use on a cell phone. We also have it in flipbook version if you are on a computer monitor, and you can also download it and save it as a PDF. We're in the process of translating this to Chinese and Spanish. We're actually wrapping those translations up now, so it's going to be available in 3 languages. And we will offer it in print soon, but right now it's just available in digital form. Next slide. One of the sections that we're most excited about is the reuse your gray water section, which is we created this one fully from scratch, and we're really excited. It offers a full detailed introduction to gray water reuse with a ton of information there. So we definitely encourage you to check this out. This is at watersavings.org, and we'll provide links to these later on. Next. So Valley Water, also in an effort to increase our support for disadvantaged communities and help ensure that they have the resources to conserve water, we've increased our efforts in that area. So right now we have a partnership with Lawn Busters to offer direct installation for customers within underserved communities. So this is senior, low income, veteran, and people with disabilities. But that program is really popular, and we understand that we can't get to everyone. And so what we've also done is started a do-it-yourself Lawn Busters workshop that enables people to come and learn hands-on experience how to convert their lawns. So it's a weekend workshop. You can check it out online. They have monthly workshops that they're offering, and participants get 50% discount on plants at our Sturdy Forest Nursery. Next slide. We've also expanded our Water Conservation is a Way of Life series videos. So these are a series of 1 to 2 minute, just introductory videos on sustainable landscape practices. It's just a way to get an audience familiar with the subject and kind of look out for more. So this video we created last year is our top tips for drip irrigation, and it features 2 of our WaterWise outdoor surveyors who you'll see, and it also features my garden, which is exciting. Linda, if you can play.
Hi, I'm VG Jagannathan.
And I'm Sandy Morgans. We are irrigation specialists from Valley Water's WaterWise Outdoor Survey Program.
Using drip irrigation in your landscape instead of sprinklers can save you a lot of water. And there are some important things to consider when you're doing the conversion.
First up, group plants together with similar water requirements and water those groups or hydrozones separately from other plants that have different water needs. Your vegetables, for instance, should be watered on a separate valve from your low water use plants.
Next up, be sure you're using valves or sprinkler conversion kits with pressure regulation and filtration. High pressure can cause leaks, and without a filter, your emitters can get clogged.
Clean-out valves can prevent your drip systems from clogging. These should be installed at the end of each drip line and open periodically to flush out the system.
Lastly, don't forget to cover your drip lines with a few inches of mulch to protect it from sun and other damage and to reduce evaporation. For more information on how to save water, visit watersavings.org.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to kind of blow through. We'll give you a little bit behind, but I think we'll be able to catch back up a little bit later in the presentation. So our large landscape survey program, which offers on-site irrigation audits and water budgeting, we expanded that program to include smaller sites. So now, or those that use less water. So before we required 1,000 CCFs for water usage for a dedicated landscape meter. We've reduced that to 500 CCF. So with that, we added 800 sites to this program. So if you work with commercial sites, I encourage you to check out waterfluence.com to see if either your site is on there or inquire about getting your site in the program. Next slide. All right, and then this will be the last of my slides. So we've continued to work, have a partnership with agencies throughout the greater Bay Area to offer Quell certifications. This partnership is ending, but they do have 2 classes scheduled for February 22nd, one in English and one in Spanish, which you can sign up for, and a third one will be scheduled. However, Valley Water is going to take over those trainings within our county for the rest of the counties for the next couple of years. So keep an eye out for those. All right, and then we'll skip to the last slide, and we can jump in for maybe one question, then we'll move on to the next, and staff will be able to answer questions, I think, via chat for the other questions.
Hi, Ashley. We have a question on the Q&A chat here from Marn Yi Lee stating, why does the home landscape rebate program not cover conversion to vegetable gardening and drought tolerant grass?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for vegetable gardening. However, with our programs, for them to be cost effective and achieve the water saving goals that we're looking for, we need to rebate the ones that are going to save the most water. So the conversion from lawn to a low water use landscape with California native plants or plants that only need to be watered, once or twice a month, reduces the water far more significantly than a vegetable garden. However, people, often still install vegetable gardens, and we do subtract that square footage out, but it's generally a very small amount. So I do definitely encourage participants to apply. The surrounding area around the vegetable beds, can qualify, and then the beds themselves wouldn't. Also, we have a gray water program that people often use for these higher water using plants. So if you want to install edibles that take more water, you can install a gray water system, get a rebate for gray water in those areas as well. And for drought tolerant grass, there are some grasses on our list, but we don't encourage people to install a new form of grass because those tend to be irrigated still with overhead irrigation, which is not as efficient, and it's still kind of gives that appearance of that, manicured green lawn area. And we kind of want to move away from having that as the norm and move people towards these low water use and ideally California native landscapes. All right, thank you. And apologies for going over a little bit, but we'll jump into the next.
Great stuff, Ashley. I appreciate it. And if you want more information pertaining to what Ashley just presented, this kind of stuff is available at all the landscape communities that we have. And at the end of the presentation today, we'll provide you information on how to join our group. Thank you again, Ashley. Next up, we've got our keynote presentation. And today, we're fortunate to have Erica Spotswood, PhD, and she's a lead scientist for the Urban Nature Lab at the San Francisco Estuary Institute. She uses data-driven approaches to quantify the benefits of nature for biodiversity and human well-being and brings science into design and planning for nature and cities. Erica, can you join us and turn your mic and camera on, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Gotcha, thank you.
Great. Hi, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm very excited to talk to this group. So Ashley's last presentation was a nice segue into what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to be focusing on if you make the conversions that Ashley was recommending, and I'm excited to look at the guidelines that she was talking about. I haven't seen those before. What are the other types of co-benefits that could come along with converting landscaping to more water-wise, California native plant focused types of plants? So next slide. Okay, so we're going to be, what I'm going to be focusing on is the co-benefits specifically to biodiversity and human health, though I'll mention there are plenty of others that come along as well, and I'll mention those as well. And then I'm going to talk at the end of my talk about a case study from Google's work around their campuses in Mountain View. So when we think about nature in cities, what comes to mind often is the pictures on the left, the gray landscapes, not very without a lot of biodiversity in them, or we may think of pests like raccoons and rats and things like that. And so this has sort of given rise to the notion of the concept of cities as biological deserts. But increasingly, we know that this is not the case, that lots of wildlife thrives in our midst, along with us, living close to us, even in pretty high density cities, as long as there are little patches of habitat around for them to use. And so this sort of naturally leads to the question of, well, what can you do that can encourage more biodiversity, and what might be the associated benefits that could come along if you made those interventions? And so one way to approach answering that question is to look to the urban ecological scientific literature. So next slide. And so we did that. So just right before the pandemic, we published a report that came out of our group, the Urban Nature Lab, called Making Nature City, where what we did was we asked the question, well, what can the science tell us about what actions you can take in urban landscapes support biodiversity, and how can you take what the science tells us about what actions are supportive and sort of use it as design inspiration and inspiration for folks like people in this group who are wanting to know how can we support biodiversity and bring along co-benefits and support nature and thriving nature in cities. What types of actions can we take? And the urban ecological science is a pretty large body of literature. So what we did was we combed through that science and said, this is from 30 years of scientific literature from around the world, where people have been looking in urban landscapes at what's there, counting species of birds and butterflies and pollinators, et cetera, and then looking at the correlations between the richness of the species that are found in urban landscapes and what the landscape's characteristics are. So we sort of took a stab at synthesizing that literature, and what we came up with is that there are these 7 kind of core elements that are really important for biodiversity support in cities. And they include the items on the right of this slide. So large patches, connections, matrix quality. So the top 3 elements are sort of describing the different types of spaces in the urban landscape. So green spaces are really important for biodiversity support, and the larger they are, the more important they are, and the more species they tend to support. Similarly, the quality of the surrounding matrix around patches, sort of everything between corridors and patches is also important. The more green it is, the more habitat supporting it is, the more species you'll be able to have there. And then corridors and connectivity are important too. So those first 3 elements sort of describe all the different types of spaces that you can occupy. It turns out no matter where you are, in patches, in corridors, or in the matrix, so the sort of amount of greenness and vegetation volume is really important for creating good habitat for all types of species. Then the following 4 elements describe the quality, and these are really actions that can be taken at any spatial scale and any place. So you can plant native plants in patches, you can plant them in the matrix, and you can plant them along corridors. You can increase habitat diversity anywhere you are, you can add special resources, and you can take management actions. So next, I'll just walk briefly through what we mean by each of these elements, and then I'll talk more about ecosystem services. So patches are just patches of green space. They can be parks, they can be college campuses, they can even be little vacant lots or pocket parks. Larger is better. The larger the patch, the more species it supports, as I was mentioning, and really truly large patches above about 130 acres serve a unique regional function of supporting species that really are found often nowhere else in the urban landscape, like species that are very intolerant of urbanization or species that that have very specific needs for like forest interior birds and things like that. But even smaller patches can be important as well, like local patches between 2 and 10 acres can support urban tolerant species and pollinators, and then large local hubs that are 10 acres or larger can also start to support some of the same species supported in regional hubs. Next slide. So connections includes stepping stones, so small patches below that 2 acre threshold can, if strategically placed between other larger features, can perform an important role in promoting movement of wildlife across the landscape. And other types of connections are riparian corridors, green streets, and greenways, all of which provide linear connectivity and create corridors. And then wildlife crossings that reduce barriers like large roads can also help to promote connectivity. Next slide. Then the quality of the matrix is essentially the assemblage is defined by the assemblage of all of the little things, all of the little features. So the combination in any particular area, any particular neighborhood, the combination of landscape areas, residential yards, street trees, green roofs, green infrastructure, flood detention basins, all of that works collectively together to create habitat that's either good or bad for biodiversity. And that also translates into being good or bad for people, as you'll see in a second. Next slide. So habitat diversity is the sort of concept of creating predictable assemblages of species. So in outside of urban landscapes, there is diversity across the landscape depending on where you are and depending on what the environmental conditions are. So for example, along creeks, riparian habitats tend to thrive because there's more water there. And then as you move away from the creek, you move into different types of habitat. And those habitats are defined by the suites of plants that tend to occur together in the same habitat. In urban landscapes, one thing that happens is that coherence of species living together in predictable groups is severed. So you walk along a street and every person's yard has a totally different set of plants. And so you don't have those predictable groups of species occurring together. And so creating habitat diversity within cities means sort of 2 things. It means increasing the coherence at the neighborhood scale. So the more you can get neighbors to sort of plant the same assemblages of species in a habitat appropriate way, the more you're increasing that coherence at the small scale. While also creating heterogeneity and habitat diversity across cities at the larger scale. And that's really about sort of making thinking about zoning and where appropriate habitats might be. So so for example, riparian areas versus valley oak woodlands versus willow groves close to the bay. These are sort of general large zones that can be used to guide the types of species that might be appropriate for a given area, depending on the environmental conditions that are found there. Next slide. Native vegetation is planting, of course, native plants. That's a combination of understory vegetation and of course native trees as well. And the advantage for this group that's really wonderful is these species are evolved in to be drought tolerant. They're evolved in our ecosystem and tend to do well here and can tolerate less or no irrigation. In addition to just planting native plants and planting native trees, you can also think about different characteristics of the assemblage of plants that you're planting. So for example, making sure you're providing year-round resources for wildlife, thinking about planting a diverse assemblage of species. So making sure you're not just planting just 2 or 3 plants, but trying to create diversity in the planting palette that you come up with, planting plants that are complementary to one another and produce resources for wildlife like flowers, fruits, and nuts. Next slide. And then special resources includes large trees and water features. So what we found when sort of combing through the scientific literature is that These two elements really stuck out as uniquely really important for many different types of species, both plants and animals. Water features are of course important for supporting aquatic organisms, but they can also support every other organism by so all life needs water at some time during its life cycle. And there are many organisms that use water periodically. They either need it during certain seasons, or they need it, every day, and may visit local water sources while being terrestrial. And so then the other feature is large trees. So large trees also have unique qualities. So they tend to have areas of decay on them that are used by lots of different birds and other types of wildlife. And they drop leaves and do other things that can support biodiversity as well. Next slide. Then the final element is management. So management is the sort of a suite of actions that we take in urban landscapes that affect biodiversity support. So this includes whether or not we have lawns, whether or not we frequently mow and prune our vegetation, the amount of light pollution, and the use of pesticides and herbicides. And you can see X's across all of these. So the less you do all of these things, the more biodiversity is supported. It turns out these things are also supportive of other goals as well. Next slide. So what other types of benefits will come along with these actions? When we think about sort of things that we might want in the urban landscape, like pest control, stormwater management, or shade provision, all of these things can be produced by sort of gray infrastructure solutions or engineering solutions. Like we can manage stormwater through stormwater management, through putting water into pipes. We can use chemicals for pest control, and we can create shade structures to create shade. But it turns out if you substitute each of these functions and use a nature-based solution instead of an engineering solution, you tend to get other benefits that come along as well. So advance one to next slide. Yeah, so for example, if you rely on wildlife to control pests, you also get other benefits such as contact between people and nature, which can produce pro-environmental behavior. Next slide. If you use green infrastructure for stormwater management, you also get pollution mitigation and habitat support. And if you use trees to produce shade instead of shade structures, you also get carbon storage, runoff reduction, traffic calming, beauty, and habitat for wildlife. And you notice human health is repeated in each of these. So next slide. So focusing specifically on the human health for a second, human health is, there's a really large body of scientific literature that has parallels to this biodiversity science that I was just talking about. In this science links the human health attributes to nature contact. So contact and access to nature ends up being really important for many different dimensions of human health. So what we've done more recently, and this is work funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, is to take those 7 elements that I just walked you through and ask, are there parallels, are there human health benefits that come along with those types of actions? So if you take action to improve connectivity or improve patch size or matrix quality in order to support biodiversity, will you also get human health? And it turns out the sort of short answer is that yes. There are human health benefits that are associated with all of these types of spaces, and the benefits in the middle have consistently been found to occur no matter what types of space you're talking about. So you will get physical activity if you create a connection like a corridor, or if you increase the size of your patch, or if you improve the matrix. All of those things tend to support lower body mass index, better physical and mental health, lower stress, and less hyperactivity, inattention in children. Next slide. Those final 4 elements are also associated with many different types of health benefits as well. And the ones in the center are again sort of created you get those benefits no matter what type of action you're talking about. So physical activity comes along with the promotion of habitat diversity. Gardening also supports physical activity, restoration, and general health. And large trees and water have also been found to do the same thing. Next slide. So I'm going to just finish by showing briefly a case study of work that's been done by Google. So this is an effort to move landscaping more from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. So this is work, SFEI has been advising Google, giving them advice about how to promote ecologically friendly landscapes for several years now, but this is really work that has been done by Google. So we don't control what they do. We are not doing the landscaping ourselves. This is Google taking action to try to promote ecologically supportive and resilient landscapes. So these are all the photos I'll show are just, this is all publicly available. You can go to Mountain View and walk around and see all these same things. So when we're thinking about trying to move towards these native landscapes, we really have to move from sort of traditional landscaping, like the photo on the left, to something that looks more like the photo on the right. But we don't have a lot of models for what that can look like. And that's why case studies of what it would look like to take all of these actions are so important. And this is why talking about the work that Google's doing is exciting, because it is one of the rare sort of examples of what this can look like when you do it on the ground. Next slide. So Google is using all of their little spaces around their campus in Mountain View. This is the area around the Googleplex, their corporate headquarters, to create both small and large patches. They have small patches mixed in with larger patches. This supports connectivity and patch size, those two first elements. Next slide. They're also using the tiny microspaces like the medians and the little areas right within parking lots and right next to parking lots. They're using lawn removal and planting of native trees and native plants alongside one another in order to just create habitat all over the place in the matrix. And they are thinking about sort of how to get that habitat coherence that I was talking about earlier. Next slide. They also do make an effort to plant assemblages of species that include both diversity and repetition, so including multiple individuals of some species, but also experimenting with broadening the suite of plants that they use, using plants that are not typically used in design landscapes, and thereby creating demand and pushing nurseries to use fewer cultivars and fewer non-natives and more native species. Next slide. They also include wildlife supporting features like bird-friendly window design, wildlife-friendly lighting, planting plants that bloom throughout the year, providing resources for pollinators and milkweed for monarchs, and water features and like water fountains. Next slide. They also have some interesting tending and maintenance strategies. So they have a thing where they take down logs and leave them in place in order to support biodiversity. They make an effort to reduce or use little to no pesticides, and they leave vegetation in general messier and irrigate during establishment, but then with backing off of irrigation over time. Next slide. The Charleston Retention Basin is one interesting example of sort of large patch of habitat where they've really done all of this together. This is an important local water feature. It also has a willow grove in it, so supporting special resources and habitat diversity and native plants. Next slide. So just my last slide is just to ask the question, well, how transferable is this work at Google? This is a unique corporation with a unique set of resources and opportunities. This may not be work that can be repeated by anyone else. So certainly it is true that there are social norms, municipal ordinances, a desire for low maintenance and a preference for a manicured look, all of which push towards more traditional landscaping on the top picture. And so how do you push against that? What is the possibility here to kind of reduce those barriers and overcome the challenges that pressure, that sort of work collectively to pressure for these very manicured looking landscapes that are in more traditional landscaping contexts? Well, so while we know that all of those things are true, and there is a lot of pressure, and that's why you have so much of this lawn sort of scattered throughout the landscape, we also know that corporate leaders like Google can and big large scale public examples can really make a difference. We know as well that there's a sort of perceived versus actual social pressure. So when you ask people why they tend their yards and why they have lawns and why they maintain their yards the way that they do, they will tell you that they feel pressure from their neighbors. But if you ask a lot of people that question, they would tell you they feel pressure from their neighbors, but that they don't themselves feel like they pressure their neighbors. What that suggests is that there is more perception, there is more of a perception of social pressure than there is actual social pressure that people may misperceive. And that may lead an opportunity to sort of break down those social pressures by teaching people that maybe the social pressure isn't as strong as they think it is. We also know that there can be relatively rapid shifts in public attitude that can happen. So in California after the drought in around 2015, this happened where social pressure shifted from wanting to have your neighbor, wanting to have your yard and your lawn be green because it looked appropriate, to feeling some social pressure in some communities to actually stop and to show that their lawns were brown because as a way to show that you were contributing to reducing pressure. Okay, that's all. That's the end of my talk. So with that, I thank you so much for listening. I've probably gone over, so I don't know if I have a chance.
No, you're perfect, Erica. That was a wonderful presentation. It's good to
Thank
go
you.
over with that kind of information. I'm going to invite Valley Water in to address some of the questions that have come in the Q&A. Ashley or Nick?
Yeah. So we've got one question that I think ties into your last slide. The Arborist and Parks Department in my city seem to favor introduced plant species. Most new commercial buildings in our city centers are landscaped with non-natives. How do we encourage them to use natives?
How do we encourage, sorry, how do we encourage who?
Arborists and parks departments in the city and commercial buildings.
Yeah, that is a very large question. I mean, I think it comes down to, there is no one answer to that question. I think policy and planning documents like urban forest master plans and biodiversity strategies that the city can create, that the sort of layer on top of general plans and other types of policy documents can provide guidance that can help to structure these types of actions and incentivize types of actions that are more supportive of biodiversity. There's some landscaping policy in Los Altos that includes a lot of information about habitat support. That's really, really interesting. So I think planning is one way. And then outreach and education, I think, is another important tool. I guess I would say, you know, in the interest of time, there's no one single answer, but it's like a suite of a combination of policy, education, incentive programs, and public examples like the example I showed at Google that can start to change people's perceptions and then change slowly the decisions that are made.
Thank you, Erica. We do need to move on. I think that we can, let's see, there is one question in there that I think a later speaker, Emmanuel Gomez, will answer regarding maintenance of native plants. And so we'll hold tight for that one. And then we've got another one in there that we'll try to answer offline, but let's move on to our.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashley. And if you are interested in following some more of Erica's work, Lisa Cuellar shared a link in the chat box. So go ahead and check that out. We're up next, so we are excited to change things up this year, and we are introducing a poetry interlude with Lorenz and Move. Lorenz is a poet, spoken word artist, and curator. His want to create a nourishing experience at his events pushes his desire to connect communities and its people. Lorenz, please turn on your mic and camera and join us on the virtual stage.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. So yeah, we're just gonna go on with it. So like this first piece, I was like fascinated about the whole science between the leaves changing colors and everything. So like, and there are many scientific reasons and theories why leaves of certain trees in their last days will turn reddish brown, while all of them are quite fascinating. What if it had nothing to do with science at all? Instead, what if leaves' last act on a tree was the ending of a tree's love letter to itself, to the seasons, to the sun, and the whole universe, you know? So this is a love letter from a tree. Dear universe, thank you. Winter, it is your time of bareness where I was only roots, trunk, and branches. how I meditated in the stillness of your nothings, became encapsulated by the frozen chill of your presence. I reflected and dreamt. In the season of resilience, I am embraced with this wholeness, even when I am just a frame of a skeleton surviving through the trials of your presence. Spring, my limbs climb higher and stretch further than the year before to embrace you and what is to follow. Little leaflets pray out of me not too long after the kiss of your first rain. You awaken us from our slumber and we strive to become the manifested image of our dreams. Water, you tickle every branch, slide off the tips of our leaves, soak the ground I drank. My roots, my trunk, my whole spirit forever thirst for you. Every cell of my being understands the importance of your existence to my own existence. You are an instrumental to the greatness I can become. Let me never miss you for too long. I ache when you are not around. Sun, how you write the stories of your travel on every leaf of me, sending forth the radiation of your very spirit, and I collect you with the foliage that covers me. You help pump life into the veins of my leaves. I position myself so I may be in direct way to receive you. How your life nourishes me to become. Summer, you are a festivity of celebrations, even with that blazing heat you bring. How my leaves have grown to the fullness and are rich with a lush green. I become shades of others who retreat under my branches. My leaves become part of the landscape of heaven. Autumn, I die a little whenever you return. How I feel old again when I am with you. You offer me so much wisdom when I'm around you. My leaves speak of what I have been through, and more you touch me, the more stories I offer you until they are brittle to reach the end of this letter. You allow me to harvest what I long to say. When I am forever in love dancing with you, dance with me again. Let the letters on my fingertips make music with your body as it slips from the grip so that they may feel the sweetness of flight. Earth, how you always keep me grounded and nourish me with the tales that thrive in my very spirit. Take these garments, my own flesh, and make them your own. How one day I myself in its entirety will return to slumber and be one with you. Until then, I adore you with my foliage. To thyself, we let go so that we may say goodbye, for love is a symphony of seasons with many different acts. And while it hurts to grow, it is joy that gives us another reason to crown our inside with another ring. Thank you, universe. Thank you for always being a part of me and for allowing me to be a part of you. How marvelous to cycle through hellos and goodbyes and to hold on and to let go and to live and die so magnificently. Thank you. With great love, a tree. And I wrote this next piece specifically for the summit, and it's called Landscape to Call Home. How do we invite the living to our landscapes? How do we steward these ecosystems aching to breed in our homes? Decolonize these lawns and redefine the look of wealth. One that pays homage to plants that understand the richness of these Californian soils. One that minutely shadows the landscapes of these regional areas we live. One that pushes us forward, adapts, and thrives without omitting these yesterdays composted into our soils. What does it mean to collect this life we call water? Can we evaporate these preconceived notions of collecting with only containers that stagnate the flow of water, make these landscapes ready to absorb the wealth of rain? Have these soils be inviting for water, to stay long enough for plants to sing in blooms, enrich foliage arrangements and fruits tasting of a magnificent song on our lips? How water can feel alive and transform in harmony these orchestrated ecosystems within our homes. Like the water finding its way back into our rivers and ocean, may we not hesitate to be a part of water's wonderful journey, as opposed to just a consumer of this wonderful and sacred resource. Let us be part of its flow and evaporate our mindset to be stewards for water for the sake of water. Irrigating, not irritating our landscapes, being cultural agents who listen and understand the needs of these living ecosystems we place in our homes. We do not need to confine these lawns and parkways to ideals that should have never been part of our Californian culture, covering with grass that tells nothing of the story of California and its wonderful landscapes. Redefine what it means to be a homeowner or business owner. Project the aesthetics that proudly shows part of our attentiveness to environmental justice, to water conservation, to a culture that represents a future that invites wildlife, that invites breath and air, that invites us to feel at home within the outside of our homes. So yeah, thank you for having me here today.
Lorenz, you're incredible. That was awesome. I never expected to get goosebumps at a landscape summit. For those wondering, this presentation will be available online in the future, so you can enjoy what Lorenz shared with us today. He's also on Instagram. If he wants to share that on the chat, go for it. Great stuff. We are moving on to our next speaker. Let me regroup here. Our next speaker is Lisa Cuellar. A little bit about Lisa, other than providing great links in the chat box. She works with stakeholders across the state to help implement outdoor water saving programs and trainings. She holds an MS in civil engineering from UCLA and is a QWEL certified, or is QWEL certified. Lisa, please turn on your mic and camera and join us.
I'm here.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Lisa.
inviting me. And wow, Lorenz, amazing poetry. Definitely got chills as well. I now have to transition over to state laws, so a little bit of a dry topic. But this particular focus today of my talk is about laws that are going to impact the landscape community directly. And I just wanted to note that I work with the California Water Efficiency Partnership. We're based out of Sacramento. Next slide, please. So what we're going to cover today are these, there's 3 California laws that recently came into effect and one that's anticipated within the next couple of years. And all of these laws impact the landscape workforce. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to make you aware of what they require. So when you're doing your work out in the field, you know that you're doing it in accordance with the law. Next slide, please. I did want to pause for just a second and launch a poll. I'm just curious to know, for all of you listening in today, do you have any general awareness of these 4 laws that I'm going to discuss with you today? So you don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs. I'm just curious to know if you have at least some general awareness that these laws are out there. So just give you a few moments to respond. And if you can't access the poll, you can also type your answer into the chat box. I still see responses coming in, so I'll give you maybe like 10 more seconds. We have to move quickly with this session. All right, Linda, if you could stop the poll and share the results. All right, so good 73% of respondents have heard about the emergency drought regulations, so that's fantastic. Less so with the Title 20 sprinkler requirement. All right, good for me to know. Hopefully then a few of you will learn get some new insights about current state law in California. All right, so next slide, please. I want to jump right into the emergency drought regulations, timely and probably on the front of everybody's mind these days. Next slide, please. So I think we heard earlier today, and again, probably many of you are aware that California at the end of last year was under extreme drought conditions. And despite the deluge of rain we got in December, this did not pull us out of drought. Reservoirs were in such a large deficit that the December rain just really helped bring some of them back to average, and still some have not met that average benchmark. So the State Water Resource Control Board adopted temporary emergency drought regulations, which went into effect in early January. As I mentioned, it's January, they're going to last for a year. There are no exceptions this time around for golf courses and other recreational facilities, which is sometimes the case with drought regulations. So no exceptions for anyone. And the fines can be up to $500 a day for violation. One thing to keep in mind with enforcement is typically fines are the last resort if somebody is non-complying, if they continue to be in non-compliance. So you can expect things like warning letters, maybe water audits, to give you an opportunity to meet the regulations. And if you don't, then, potential fines. So what does this mean exactly for you all? And what are the prohibitions in the rule that relate to landscaping, the landscaping workforce, maintenance, care of our landscapes, etc. So overwatering yards generating dry runoff is not allowed. So we don't want to see that urban drool. We don't want to see water shutting off onto the hardscapes like sidewalks and into the gutters, etc. That's not going to be allowed. You cannot water grass within 40 hours after rainfall. And I should have specified here that this applies for storms that are 1/4 inch or greater. Using potable water to irrigate grass on public street medians or the landscaped area between the street and the sidewalk is not allowed. Oh, and I forgot to say to switch to the next slide, Linda. Thank you. So there's the list I've been reading. Sorry about that. A note about number 3, the prohibition on street medians only applies to grass, and trees should still be irrigated. And we heard from Erica's presentation just how important trees are for our cities. They provide numerous benefits, and no water agency or local jurisdiction is advocating to harm our trees. So make sure that you're still irrigating trees in the public space. Using potable water for decorative fountains or filling artificial lakes or ponds is not allowed. There are some exceptions. I do think those exceptions relate to like habitat restoration if they're serving some other benefit. But if you think you might qualify for an exception, you should look into that. And then finally, HOAs cannot fine the residents if they want to cut back on watering their lawns or other landscaping. So sort of eliminate some of that pressure from HOA requirements. So that's the emergency drought temporary regulation in a nutshell. I want to move on to the next law, which is the Title 22 sprinkler spray bodies. And I saw from the poll results that not a lot of you are aware of this one. Next slide, Linda. I want to go ahead and launch the second poll to get a sense for who's listening in today and how you engage directly with irrigation systems. So I would like to know which of these statements best describes you. You can select all that apply. Are you designing? Are you installing? Are you maintaining irrigation systems? Or maybe you don't do any of that. I was kind of curious to see what your experience is. Title 20 is going to directly impact anybody that designs, installs, or maintains irrigation systems. Or maybe just another couple seconds. Okay, Linda, can we go ahead and share the results out? So a big chunk of you don't work directly with irrigation systems, and that's fine. And a lot of you maintain irrigation systems. Great. Well, here, next slide, please. Here are the nuts and bolts with the sprinkler spray body regulation. It is a new law that requires pressure regulation for sprinklers, and there's some flow performance measures as well. This law became effective way back in October 1st of 2020. There's the specific code citation if you're interested in looking it up. And note that fines will be levied upon a retailer. This has to do with the sale of these types of sprinkler equipment. So like whole supply stores, irrigation supply stores. Those are the types of folks that need to be concerned about this law. And if you're purchasing sprinklers, you need to be aware of this law as well. I noted they must meet specific performance requires, and also if you're selling sprinkler heads, they have to contain the proper markings in order to be legally sold in California. Next slide. Just for some additional clarification, I thought I would present this image on the right, which sort of differentiates between what a spray nozzle is versus a sprinkler body, because the Title 20 is labeled spray sprinkler bodies. This is the exterior case or shell of a sprinkler that's incorporating a means of connection to the piping system designed to convey water to a nozzle or orifice. Rotors are not part of this requirement, just a side note. And if we can move on to the next slide, Linda, please. So what are the benefits of pressure regulated spray bodies? Well, the California Energy Commission estimated that annually there are over 30 million sprinkler spray bodies sold in California for turf irrigation, and only some of those sold before the law contain pressure regulation. And when we have pressure regulation embedded in our sprinkler systems, we can reduce water waste by eliminating or mitigating misting or overspray. And also pressure regulation can really help improve the distribution uniformity of your irrigation system, which means those concentric brown rings that we see in sports fields or turf areas hopefully will be diminished. And as I mentioned, there are specific performance requirements for sprinklers now sold in the state of California. If you want to look up the details on that, go ahead and check out WaterSense's specification that's listed here that was put out in September of 2017. Next slide, please. So what this means for landscapers, landscape workforce, is costs could increase by as much as $3 per spray sprinkler body that's that has a 4-inch stem. These were projected cost increases back in 2020. I don't know if the costs have actually increased by that much. So, a little bit more of an expense to purchase and then go ahead and install those sprinkler spray bodies. It is recommended that if you have to change out one, maybe you work in maintenance and you come across a broken sprinkler, you want to go ahead and purchase new pressure regulated sprinkler heads for all heads with under one irrigation valve. And this is to help ensure match precipitation rates, optimal performance of the system, and optimal distribution uniformity. And not doing so is really going to result in things like over irrigation and runoff. And as I mentioned previously, this rule does not apply to rotors. Okay, finally, I'm going to move on, if Linda, you can progress the slides to this law, which the formal adoption I don't believe has occurred yet, but it's underway. Well, let me actually, if you can go to the next slide, I think I have more details there about timing with this particular law. So it did become effective in January of 2022, but I know that in December of last year, there was some public hearings for an amendment to this particular law, which involves organic waste recycling. Organic waste is just a reference to like the green waste that you put into your green bin. And typically that green waste is processed at a facility to create compost or mulch. This law directly impacts, well, cities and counties are going to be responsible for carrying out the requirements of the law. And if they are non-compliant, the fines will be anywhere from $500 to $10,000 a day. So quite a steep penalty there. This law came into effect because it supports Governor Newsom's mandate to reduce statewide methane emissions by 40% by 2030. Some of you might not know this, but 20% of California's methane emissions come from landfills. And that's primarily from like green waste going to the landfills, decomposing, you know, all those bacteria munching on that green waste generates methane as a decomposition byproduct. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's more potent, in fact, than carbon dioxide. And that's why green wastes are being targeted as part of this law to help really drive down methane emissions by 2030. Next slide, please. So the directives under this law require that Cal Recycle divert 75% of organics from landfills by 2025, so right around the corner. Again, the responsibility is going to fall upon cities and counties. They must obtain for use or give away a minimum of 0.08 tons of organic waste per resident. So for example, if you live in a city where there's about 100,000 residents, the city or county is going to need to obtain for use or give away 8,000 tons of organic waste. So that again means mulch or compost. And currently there's, based on this requirement, the 0.08 tons of organic waste per resident, across the state, there appears to be a shortage of organic waste being produced by about 12 to 14 million tons. As a result of this new law, you're probably going to see facilities popping up nearby that are processing green waste to create compost and mulch. That's a good thing. It's going to make it more accessible to you. And cities and counties are also on the hook to enforce the compost and mulch related measures that are included in the water efficient landscape ordinance. And I've got a list of those requirements there. So you still have to follow your soil report recommendations. If you're doing a landscape installation, you have to incorporate compost at 4 cubic yards per 1,000 square feet, apply 3 inches of mulch, and use organic recycled mulch if locally available. All right, next slide. So what does this mean for landscapers? Well, one thing is that there could be some increases in plastic contamination, unfortunately, because a lot of food wastes are going to be diverted or redirected into our green bins, and plastic is associated with food waste. The state does plan on increasing their monitoring for this plastic contamination as a result of this law. We'll see how that goes, but they are going to be very proactive to try to prevent those unwanted things from getting into compost and mulch. Most likely going to see lots of free mulch and compost available in the future as more facilities pop up locally. And again, cities and counties are on the hook to give away a significant amount of this material. Therefore, I suspect there'll be a lot of free giveaways. I mentioned item number 3, and then just a side note, you should still, if you are doing landscape maintenance at a client's land property and you are chipping wood, those tree trimmings, whatever, on site, you can still apply that on site if that was a best practice you were implementing before. It won't count towards the city or county's procurement targets, but it's still a best practice that you all should continue to implement. Next slide, please. Okay, in 2 minutes, I have to get through this statewide small engine ban. So the statewide small engine ban, this is the one that is not fully in effect yet because there were some amendments. So I misspoke when I talked about the organics. It's actually the statewide small engine ban that had some amendments being considered in December. Linda, if you can move to the next slide, please. Just want to take a quick poll and get a sense for just whether or not you think this statement is true or false. By numbers, there are more small engine landscape maintenance equipment, so that includes things like lawnmowers or leaf blowers, than there are lightweight vehicles, meaning just like passenger vehicles, not your commercial type cars in California. Do you think that's true or false? Just give you a couple more seconds. Okay, let's stop the poll there. Most of you think that that's a true statement, and I'll let you know if that's true or not in just a second. Linda, if you could proceed to the next slide. Yeah, so I just wanted, again, to clarify, I was incorrect by saying that the organics waste recycling is under amendment. That in fact applies to the statewide small engine ban. The governor issued an executive order in September of 2020 with the goal of transitioning to 100% zero emission off-road vehicles and equipment by 2035 where feasible. And off-road equipment, that category, well, what qualifies are spark ignition engines rated at or below 19 kilowatts gross power or less. That's also equivalent to 25 horsepower or less. So engines in this category are typically lawn and garden equipment, as well as other outdoor powered equipment and specialty vehicles. The requirements eliminate the sale of these small engine equipment by January 1st of 2024. You can move to the next slide, Linda. So why is this ban important? And this actually answers the poll question. There are in fact more small engine equipment in California, 16.7 million in fact, compared to light duty passenger cars, which account for 13.7 million in the state. Some of you might not know this, but today operating the best-selling commercial lawnmower for 1 hour emits as much smog-forming pollution as driving the best-selling 2017 passenger car, a Toyota Camry, about 300 miles. So from LA to Las Vegas. I know I'm 1 minute over, but I think I have 2 slides after this one, so bear with me. I'll get through this material as quick as I can. The other thing to note is that by 2031, without this law, small engine emissions, so again, from landscaping equipment, will be more than twice those from passenger cars because car emissions are becoming increasingly less and less, hence the need for the ban. All right, next slide, please. And I mentioned already, these are the types of landscaping equipment impacted by the law. Next slide, please. And then finally, what does this mean for landscapers? So again, the proposed amendments which were being considered in December requires the law applies to new sales or leases and would not affect equipment already in use. One thing to consider is that new zero emission equipment, so electric powered equipment, are more expensive, but they do have operational savings because you're using less fuel and there is significantly less maintenance to keep those equipment in good shape. The state has said that they will offer about 30 million in subsidies for purchases of this equipment. It's yet to be determined how that money will be distributed, perhaps maybe in rebates and incentive programs. That's, again, we haven't seen, there's no plan for how that will roll out yet. And then one concern is that battery times, the battery life with some of this equipment or operating times might not be enough if you are maintaining really large lots. So like an acre or more, could run into some problems there. And as one final note, if you are conducting maintenance in Palo Alto, Los Altos, or Menlo Park, you probably are already aware that those cities have banned gas-powered leaf blowers. And Linda, if you can go to my last slide. I know we don't have any time for questions, but if you have a burning question or something you'd like me to answer, please drop it in the chat box and I'll see if I can get to that. And you can also shoot me an email. I am at lisa@cowep.org. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Hope you learned something new today.
Yeah, great information, Lisa. And you lost no participants following Lorenz, so well done. I am going to bring in Ashley. We are not getting out of a live question or two, or someone from Valley Water's coming in. There we go.
Yeah, it looks like there's quite a few that came in, so I think maybe it'll be best we'll go through and we'll answer these through the Q&A and just look out for the typed answer.
Sounds good. I'll be responding in chat.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa. Well done. Next up is Anne-Marie Benz with the California Native Plant Society, and she'll present on their New Bloom campaign. Anne-Marie is the Horticultural Programs Manager for CNPS. She has spent a decade and a half serving landscapes and watersheds with nonprofits in California and Arizona. Anne-Marie, we're welcome to have you. If you'd please turn on your mic and camera and join us.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's good to see so many familiar names in the attendees here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our Bloom campaign and some of the other things that California Native Plant Society has that may benefit your industry. Next. As I mentioned, I'm the horticulture programs manager. I spent a decade, though, in Arizona with an organization doing watershed management and repairing and restoration, and managing watersheds without water and forests without trees is a whole different mindset in coming into some of this. Now, being in California for about 7 years and seeing the extent of this drought and this week's news on it being the longest drought in recorded history, basically, or the most extreme drought, we have a new perspective to try and think about with landscapes. Next. CMPS is a nonprofit, a 501c3, dedicated to conserving California's native plants, these habitats, and these beautiful spaces that we all enjoy and appreciate time in. Next. And we're doing that through restoring these spaces one garden at a time. We're an unusual organization that we have a statewide office that I'm part of, and then we also have 35 chapters throughout the state and down through Baja. So I encourage you to also make contact with your local chapter. They have amazing people with huge amounts of resources and knowledge as well, if you have questions. Next. California is a unique place. We're a huge state to begin with, just land-wise, we're enormous. And with that comes such variety of native plants in this area. The variety of plants in California makes us a biodiversity hotspot, one of the best places for diverse plants all over. And California native plants and these habitats and spaces are also what makes California so livable in many ways. Next. And when we say a native plant, we're talking about the plants in that region that have co-developed along with the soils, the microbes, the precipitation patterns of where you're at. So we're looking at the plants native to your area, because as California is a big space, not everything's appropriate everywhere, but native plants can help us really excel at meeting some of these new regulations that Lisa was just talking about and making some of the differences that have been discussed already in this conference. Next. These types of plants give us the opportunity to take what is a fairly sterile basic yard that requires a fair amount of maintenance and turn it into, next, the opportunity for habitat. If we took out half of the yards in the US, we would create over 20 million acres of new habitat, which is more than all of our national parks combined. So it's a real opportunity through each of these spaces to create big change. Next. And we're also asking a lot more of our spaces, our residential spaces, our commercial spaces, our industrial or city areas. We want a lot more than we used to out of them. We're no longer often as, we're asking more than just a decorative value, than just having an attractive frontage. We're looking at wanting pollinators, monarchs. We want the carbon sequestration, or we want food, or we want a lot more out of it. And so we're going to talk about some of the ways that we consider doing that and some of the things that might make it easier for you and for your clients. Next. So the benefits of native plants. They've got a lot of these. They need less irrigation because they're already adapted to those weather patterns. Not gonna say they don't need any irrigation. That's often a bit of a misnomer. They need it for establishment. We need it for drought. We have dry times, dry areas. They reduce the maintenance because you're not always mowing. And as we're looking at changing out some of these, some of the small engines, this might be really useful. They reduce the harmful runoff because we're not needing to spray pesticides, herbicides, the various things, and therefore they're not getting into your landscape, your soils, they're not around your family, your pets, your neighbors, and they're not getting into your waterways, which are going to become more and more valuable. And they support local biodiversity. Next. So there's often a misnomer or a missed idea that California native plants are cactuses and redwoods, and that leaves very little for variety in landscaping. But you can use California native plants to get almost any landscape look you want while supporting biodiversity and wreaking all these other features that we're talking about, all these other benefits. Next. And one of the big focuses for us is Bloom California. Bloom California, you hopefully going to be seeing Bloom California, Bloom My Love, different hashtags that go along with it, and this logo. Next. It's a unique multi-year marketing campaign funded by a specialty crop block grant. And these grants are often what you see when you hear, when you see advertising for Buy California Wines, California Olives, things like that. Big industries across California. And this one is based around the idea of increasing sales of 11 types of native plants by a minimum of 20%. And it's a full marketing campaign. Next. And so we're doing a lot of marketing we have a marketing agency we're working with, Loacom, who's terrific and has worked a lot in these industries, has great ethics. We're doing a lot of social media, investing heavily in it. We have point of sale materials, we have micro videos, we have trainings available for the nurseries that are participating. And we're trying to bring a lot of attention specifically to these 11 types and hopefully to making a difference throughout the industry and supporting those people growing, selling, working in these native plants. Next. So these are the 11 plants. The idea is that not every plant for everyone in every situation, but with this selection, there should be something for everyone available. Next. So why these natives? There are thousands of native plants throughout the state of California, and many of them are in production and available for horticultural use. So why these 11? And some of it are the reasons stated here, but also we were working with a specialty crop block grant, which had a list of specialty crops. We went through a filtration process of genetics, ones that weren't likely to cause problems with the wildlife urban interfaces. Were they available and in production, at least in various parts of the state? Were they ones that had the opportunity to increase by 20% in sales? We don't need to promote poppies. Everybody knows about poppy, that type of thing. And really, would they make a big difference for habitat? Were they easy to use in a landscape? Were they attractive? Were they going to set people up for success? Both the nurseries, the people purchasing them, long-term, were they going to be added value in all these different ways? So it was a real process to come down to that 11 list. Next. But let's say those 11 plants and maybe the Bloom campaign aren't quite the right thing for you and for your organization. If they are, terrific, be in touch. We'd love to have you involved. But if they're not, and you're looking at plants, what plant, what place? Calscape.org is a really powerful database. You can see it's got almost 8,000 plants in here. You can narrow that down by by all kinds of factors. There's an advanced search feature. You can put in the address you're looking for. It will narrow that down to the plants right in that region. Then you can add in, do you want a perennial? Are you looking for a tree? Are you all kinds of different factors. Do you want it to be such height, such width, different flowering seasons, different color schemes? You can do whether you want a butterfly or a bee garden. Do you want it to be deer resistant? All sorts of different pieces. And it'll help you to narrow down to a really good list of plants for your area that should help you have a successful landscape. Because really what we all want is for the consumer to have a really good, successful experience as early and as often as possible with the plants and with their landscape, and hopefully with you, as you're working with them. Next. So you've considered the Bloom campaign. You know what a native plant is. You've looked through and chosen a list of plants and possibly fallen in love with some, but what do you do with them? And we've also hear often from people is there are all these lawn to garden ones throughout the state. I've taken out my lawn. Now what? What do I do next? So we've got a couple of starter ways to look at this. This is through the Cowscape Garden Planner. On Cowscape, there's a Garden Planner tab. You can go in, answer a few easy questions, where you're at, what type of look you are looking for, are you front yard, backyard, patio area, do you like a clean, neat lines? Do you like, all kinds of different looks to it. And what it'll do is bring you to kind of a conceptual drawing like this. And it'll give you an idea of what you could convert that space into. Next. And then along with that, it'll give you this type of a landscape drawing. This is obviously for a different one. This is if you want a bocce court. Only the coolest people have bocce courts in their yards, apparently. So this will give you an idea of the layout, how it's going to look from the drawing area. And then along with that, it'll give you a selected plant list. It'll help you to go ahead and plan for purchase and install this type of a landscape. Next. We also have our Parkways Planner. And this started out down in Long Beach. Long Beach Water started doing this for parkways and helped us to develop a series of 5 plans along with associated plant types. And now we have that available to anyone who would like to use it. Now that median strips can no longer be watered, these type of planting designs can be used in median strips, in the parkways between the curbs and sidewalks, in other long, narrow areas. They can be mixed, they can be repeated over and over if you have longer areas. And along with a local plant list to fill the various types of herb or ground cover, rushes, or different pieces of this, it gives you an easy way to look at having an easily reproducible or installable plan. In Long Beach, they worked with local nurseries to have parkway kits where the people could actually just pick up all the plants and then all of the ground cover, the mulch, the stone, because they were by the curb wanting people to step out onto their car, and made it super simple to change it out and had terrific ROI on this. And then next, we also have, through the Bloom California campaign, a whole section on inspiration and resources. There's a full variety of planting looks with those 11 types of plants that I talked about earlier. And they have everything from, maybe you don't have a real lawn, you're looking at container gardening. You have a patio, a very small space, but you really want plants. Everything up to fairly large spaces. We've got a couple of different looks. We have on the left here an informal or more natural look versus on the right, a more modern, a more contemporary look. And with each of these looks, using these same type of plants, you also get a concept of how many plants it will take to get a fully grown in look. It's often more than we think it's going to take. A lot of us go to nurseries and we impulse buy, and we never buy enough, or we rarely buy enough. And this gives you that list of plants, the numbers you're going to need, an idea of spacing. I love that we worked with Meriday Design on this, and they included conceptual drawings of people for the scale, so you know whether you're getting a Chihuahua plant or a Burmese mountain dog plant. When we're buying them in 4-inch pots or something, sometimes it's a little hard to know what we're going to actually be growing into. So there's a couple of different ways through these different planning groups that we have to give you inspiration, to give you ideas or next steps, things to show your clients, or if you are the client, to start looking at with your nurseries. The other thing in CalScape you can do is once you get that list of plants, or once you've fallen in love with a plant, if you're on the page of a plant, you can even click, there's a Find Nurseries Selling This Plant link, and you can find nurseries around you that have those plants in there, that they in their nurseries and available to you, which makes it a lot easier to pin down. There's also ways to print out plant tags. There's ways to print out the whole list you've put together, take it with you to your nursery. If you're installing it, it's a way to give it to your clients so that they have a list of what's in there. And then with the Bloom ones, we have a lot of resources in there, and we'll be continuing to grow resources on everything from quick tips for maintenance, for pruning, for installation, why these plants. And if you are a nursery or working in that field, we have a back end piece where we have continuing ongoing resources and education for the partners on the Bloom program. Next, please. And then we've talked through finding the plants, looking at the plans to work with them. So we've also got a couple of pieces of education that we're coordinating on that we're very excited about. If you wanted to know what's next or how to do the next pieces, we're going to be coordinating with CalWEP on a nurseries training, a native plants in nurseries, how to maintain, sell, show off native plants in the nurseries. It's an online, multi-section, work at your own pace training where you can, it'll have a couple of different language options, I believe, and closed captioning as well. It's currently up on the CNPS site, and we will be moving it to a joint site soon and continuing to work on it and hoping to bring you good and better education. CalWEP is doing amazing work, and this was originally funded out of the Metropolitan Water District region. So they invested in this, and we are coordinating and glad to be growing it and moving it into future and next steps. And then we also have, working with Theodore Payne Foundation down in Southern California, a certified California native plant landscaper training. It's currently available in the LA region, LADWP area. It's in English and in Spanish, and we are getting ready to move it throughout the state. Theodore Payne Foundation will be leading the charge in Southern California. California Native Plant Society will be leading it in Northern California. It will be a combination of taught online, live online, as well as a couple of in-person classes with a lot of different resources. It'll be available in English and in Spanish. And so we're excited to have that rolling out. How to identify plants, how to plan for them, install them, maintain them with the native plants. So we'll have more education coming soon. Next. And then I think we've made up a little bit of time. I don't know if we have time for Q&A. If we do, glad to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Anne-Marie. Ashley or Valley Water, chime in with questions?
So actually, we haven't gotten any within the chat. If anybody wants, whoa, they're popping up. All right. In addition to DIY techniques, I'm wondering if CNPS retains a list of qualified landscape architectural firms by region or area where CNPS may not necessarily recommend, but would rather allow to share their respective firms' ideas, thoughts, and projects in addition to their contact information.
You know, that's something we have coming up. We are investing heavily in CalScape. We are doing some rebuild on it to make it more attractive, more usable, and add some features. And one of them will be for professionals in the landscape field to put up what they're doing, and the goal is to eventually have it so they can share some portfolio pieces, show what they've been doing, and help people to find well-qualified professionals. So we have that coming soon.
And then last question, California Native Plant Landscaping Program, how will we be able to find the video and classes? I dropped a link for the nursery program and for Bloom, California in the chat, but if there's another.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. The landscaper training will be available probably late summer, early fall. It will be through CMPS, so it will be available through our website. And we'll try and make sure and communicate that out as much as possible through CalWEP and through the water districts as well.
Great, thanks. And for more information, Stephanie Morris posted a link about our local CMPS, and Lisa Cuellar dropped some other good links as well. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Last, but probably the most important component of your native garden, we have Emmanuel Gomez to discuss tips and tricks for native plant maintenance. Emmanuel is an Oakland native and founded Native Soil Inc. in 2015 in an effort to empower his community by providing jobs, education, and training. Emmanuel started doing landscape construction when he was 12. Emmanuel, please join me on the virtual stage by turning on your camera and mic.
Okay, there we go.
Welcome, Emmanuel.
Okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm definitely excited to be here, and I've heard some really great information. Anne-Marie mostly covered the native plant information, so I'm going to be talking a little bit more about irrigation principles related to the native plants. So can we do the next slide? So just about us, we were founded in 2015 based out of Oakland. We are a construction and design build firm. My partner and I are both Cal Poly alumni. We study landscape architecture. And our mission is pretty much tied in with this summit, which is we're a construction, education, and social organization dedicated to the protection of water, plants, and soils while empowering disenfranchised communities. Can we do the next slide? So a little bit about me. Born and raised in Oakland. I've always been interested in learning about native plants, irrigation, and just how to pass that education down. So there's not a lot of Latino-owned businesses for landscaping, but the major workforce does come from the Latin base. So definitely it was important to me to start a company and teach everything I learned at Cal Poly throughout summits, and just, reading and mainly being able to communicate it in Spanish to a lot of these workers. So main thing is that I want to leave a better planet for our children. So by passing down all of this knowledge, I think we can all do a little bit of our part to contribute to that. Next slide. So Anne-Marie covered what native plants are, and this is from the Audubon Society, directly from them. So native plants are those that occur naturally in the region in which they evolve. And what's the importance of native plants? Landscaping choices have meaningful effects on populations of birds and insects, and they need it to survive. The bottom line is homeowners, landscapers, and local policymakers can benefit birds and other wildlife by simply selecting native plants when making their landscape decisions. So it goes with this whole conversation of, removing lawn and adding native plants. The pictures below are for one of the projects my company did for Cherryland Community Center in Hayward, and it's all bay friendly, and everything was, efficient irrigation systems and 100% of native plants. Next slide. So for efficient irrigation systems for native plants and for any type of plant, there are 6 main components that need to be installed in the system, and I'm definitely going to talk about one at a time, but they kind of get installed in this order. So you would have a water meter, a backflow, a master valve, a flow sensor, a smart controller, and a rain sensor. And this would be like the ultimate package to have you a very efficient irrigation system. To irrigate the plants, drip irrigation is ideal and the mostly recommended. And if you do have grass, a rotator system is definitely what with pressure regulated heads would be what you would want to lean towards, but there are some drip irrigation systems for grass itself. So it definitely saves you a lot of water and reduces overhead watering. Next slide. So a water meter, it's a dedicated irrigation meter, and it exclusively meters water used for outdoor watering and irrigation. So everybody should have this in a residential or commercial site. So basically you're able to see exactly how much water you are using strictly for your irrigation system. So you'd kind of split it away from the home or the building. Additionally, the easiest way to check for a leak is if you open up the water meter and there's like a little black star inside. If that thing is spinning, most likely there's a leak. But if you open it and it's just still, you definitely don't have a leak. So that's the importance of a water meter, mainly just to know exactly how many gallons you are using strictly on your irrigation. Next slide. So the backflow prevention device is a preventer valve designed to prevent the water in your main water supply lines from flowing in a reverse direction. So sometimes what happens is the water will siphon or vacuum within the system, and it'll kind of like shoot back. So if you don't have a backflow prevention device, it could end up back in, if it's a residential place, like back in your kitchen or toilets, it'll just kind of vacuum back. And if you're on a commercial site, that water would just vacuum back into our main source. So we don't want that. So at the bottom of the backflow, the water would just kind of exit, preventing any water from going back into a building or a main water supply. Next slide. So after the backflow, we would have something called a master valve. And this is basically a fail-safe valve that will prevent from having major leaks, especially like at night or when somebody's not monitoring the system. So there's two types of master valves. There's a normally closed master valve, which means every time a certain valve, say like a certain area, the valve turns on, this master valve turns on together and turns off together. So that way, when the system is not in use, the pipes are not under pressure. And if there was like a big leak, it would prevent that. And the problem with the normally closed valves is if you have like quick couplers or you want hose bibs, your system is going to be without pressure if it's not in use. So sometimes there could be problematic, although you can add like a time window in your controller that says I need the master valve to be open from 8 to 4 because that's what time the maintenance people come. And then a normally open master valve, it's the same exact thing, except it is what it says. It's an open master valve that's always open. So you're always going to have access to your water. It's always going to be under pressure, but it gets connected to your flow sensor. So in case there was a major leak, the flow sensor talks to the controller turns off the normally open master valve, and it'll send, if it's a smart controller, it'll send you an email or a text saying, hey, there was a leak. The master valve is now closed, and it'll just prevent from any major leaks. Next slide. So the flow sensor is going to go right after the master valve, and it measures how slowly or quickly water is flowing through an irrigation system, and it sends that information to the controller. So it has like a paddle inside of it, and it spins. So, you know, the faster it spins, it's more water going through, the slower is the less water. So it's connected to the controller, and it can tell you exactly how many gallons per minute you have per valve, per zone. And if this thing is to spin out of control, it's like definitely a mainline leak. So it will talk to the controller, turn off the whole mainline, turn off the master valve, and prevent a leak. So these two, the master valve and flow sensor, go hand in hand. Like you really can't have one without the other. Next slide. So for all of this, you need a smart controller, which is it lets you turn your sprinklers on and off remotely through an app or through a computer. It also helps you schedule when your sprinklers will turn on and off, or your drip system. And most of these have they're attached to a weather channel. So if it's too hot, it might bump up your water a little bit. If it's too cold, it might reduce it, depending on how you program it. And mainly, if it's raining or something like that, it will turn off the irrigation system, knowing that it's you don't need water that day. So it's definitely, you could have everything, but if you don't have a smart controller, you won't be able to read your flows, and you won't be able to operate a master valve. So it's definitely very, very important. Next slide. So additionally, you need a rain sensor, which kind of goes with some of the things we were talking about, when sometimes there might be like there's nothing worse that when it's raining and you're driving by and somebody's lawn is still being irrigated. So obviously they don't have a smart controller or a rain sensor. So what this thing has, it has like a small bucket and it fills up. So after it reaches a certain threshold that you could program to 1/2 inch or 1 inch, etc., it'll automatically turn off your controller. So no matter what program you have, it's saying, yo, like I have a 1/2 inch of water in here, so I don't need to turn on. Next slide. And this is kind of like the McDaddy of the irrigation systems. It's called a hydrometer. So it's a flow sensor, master valve, and water meter in one. So they're very expensive, but they save a lot of space because now you don't need 3 components, you only have one. And this one will just kind of directly talk to the controller. Sometimes it's a lot easier to troubleshoot because it's one thing being connected versus sometimes your flow sensor doesn't work, sometimes your rain sensor doesn't work, or sometimes your water meter doesn't work. So definitely this one is one that's kind of like a 3-in-1 combo. Next slide. So this is a typical plan. This one was the plan for irrigation. This is the legend, not irrigation, for Cherryland irrigation. And this is the legend. So as you can see, we have a water meter, a backflow, a smart controller, a rain sensor, a master valve, and a flow sensor. And there's been times where I've installed systems and they definitely don't have not even a master valve or flow sensor. So this is a very good irrigation system. So if you were to look at its legend and you identify these 6 components, then you're definitely good. If you're missing any of these, it might not be the most efficient. Next slide, please. So this is the actual plan, and in the order that it gets installed, near the street, we have our water meter, and then you kind of move towards the line and you have your backflow, then your master valve and your flow sensor, and at the end, you're gonna have your smart controller and your rain sensor. So this was, again, for Cherryland, and on the left side, it's kind of those pictures that I showed you guys, where we have all these native plants, and every single thing here is drip. There's 0 sprinklers on this whole entire site, and it's a very, very, very efficient water system. And I chose this one because it was like one of my favorites and definitely one of the best designs that I have worked with. Next slide. So this is also Cherryland, but at the parking lot. So as you can see on the top left, it's Hunter Eco Wrap. So this is a type of drip that has a special fabric wrapped around the drip lines, and it kind of carries the water throughout the whole inline drip instead of just kind of having a small emitter and it just kind of drips, creates like a circle pattern. So this was compared to the top right Rainbird XFS copper, and this one's also a very good brand. It's costs a lot less than the Hunter Eco Wrap, but this technology has a small piece of copper in every emitter. So when a root tries to go into that emitter, that's where the water comes out, it will just kind of retract because I guess the roots don't like the copper and then they just won't grow in there. So the bottom left and right is, you can see the before. We installed a whole bunch, and it's actually a bioswale to that whole medium strip. So all the water drains in there, and they use specialty plants like carex and juncus, and these plants will absorb metals and oils and all kinds of chemicals, turn it into oxygen. So apart from being a water treatment planter, it also has 100% native plants, and you could kind of see the after, how it grow very lush, very green, full. So this irrigation system, the Hunter Eco Wrap, is definitely, in my opinion, one of the best out there in the market, but it is also like really expensive. I mean, compared to the Hunter Eco Wrap, one roll is probably like $350, and Rainbird Copper is probably like $230. So it's definitely a lot pricier, but I would recommend the system. Next slide. So you could kind of see on the top left how a typical drip pattern would be, where drip comes out like, say, every 12 inches, and it kind of creates a small circle of just a wet pattern. And then we have on the bottom, we have the Rainbird Copper and the Eco Wrap as well. And top right, this is the Hunter Eco Map. So it's very, very similar to the Hunter Eco Wrap. So it's this mat that you could roll and has drip lines, you know, at every like 12 inches. But this special fabric, it absorbs the water and spreads it throughout the whole grassy area. So instead of having like a pattern like the top left, where if you put grass on top of that, it wouldn't really equally distribute the water, the Hunter Eco Mat on the right definitely does the job. And I've installed this for a couple clients where we wanted to avoid runoff or damage certain fences or things like that. So definitely a really good system to consider. If we obviously recommend not using typical lawns, but if you were going to use it on like a street medium or something like that, some cities do have banned complete sprinklers on street mediums, but they do allow things like Hunter EcoMat. Next slide. Another really efficient, like if you were to, again, keep your grass or use like natives, we mostly recommend the Hunter MP rotators because they are they have a really small precipitation rate compared to regular sprinklers. So you could water for longer using less water. And additionally, they create like small streams of water versus like, if it's a spray, if it's windy, it will just kind of carry it away. And with these streams, it's really, the drops are a lot fatter and it's a lot harder for the wind to carry them away. So it's definitely very efficient, and you would accompany it with like a pressure regulated sprinkler head, like a PRS 40, that would get you, really good, efficient overhead spray, maybe for like a ground cover or for things where a drip wouldn't be as efficient. Next slide. And that's it. So definitely, if you have any questions, can answer them.
Yeah, thanks, Emmanuel. Ashley, are you there with on the Q&A?
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, we had one question come in. How long do the Hunter Eco products last? Do they decompose? And just a quick caveat, I just want to make sure we understand Valley Water doesn't endorse any one brand over another. And so, there's a lot out there. We want to make sure you all do your research on those. Right?
Yeah,
But,
definitely.
how long do the eco products last? Do they decompose?
Definitely not sure about how long they last, but they don't decompose. The ones that we've installing are probably we've installed them over 10 years ago and they're still doing really good. But most systems, they only work for like, or not work, but you leave them on for like 3 to 5 for establishment. Once the plants are established, especially if they're native, they kind of just really don't need water, or maybe it'll be very minimal. But there are a lot of brands, like definitely don't endorse any brands either, but there's like Hunter, Rainbird, many brands out there. So definitely do your research and see what it's definitely application based as well.
Another question about those the eco mats. Can the Hunter eco mat be used for planting beds or just subsurface for turf?
They can be used for planting beds, but I think on a planting bed, you probably use the eco wrap instead, because once you kind of start making holes, you'll start ripping into the fabric. So definitely very similar products, just different applications.
All right, we have another one come in. How do we educate cities, county staff to accept drip irrigation? Getting lots of pushback.
Well, I mean, I think definitely it'd have to be, you get involved maybe like on a local level where you're pushing your city officials to endorse these type of products. I know definitely we have statewide laws that prevent spray on small parking mediums, things of that nature. But it's just definitely the best technology out there that will literally save you like 90% water use if you go sprinklers versus drip.
And then we have one last question. How do you compare the Rainbird and Hunter inline drip to Netafim?
Well, the Netafim, I know it's definitely not bait friendly because it has a certain chemical that comes out through the drip emitters that prevents the root intrusion. And then the Rainbird, what was the other brand?
Hunter inline and Rainbird.
So the Hunter inline and Rainbird, the Rainbird is the one with the copper technology, so it costs a little bit more. And then the Hunter, I've used it a lot and it's very efficient, just has different technology regarding root intrusion. So it's probably more bound to get clogged depending on what type of plants you're using.
Well, thank you. That I think that looks like it wraps up all the questions. We did have one suggestion from a participant. The links can't be copy and pasted from the chat, but they can from the Q&A. And so we actually added those links as a response to her question in there. So if you see a question from Mary Dadio, about the links, open it up, expand it, and all the links have been added in there so you can quickly copy and paste them. But we will be uploading all this information to our site, our website as well. I answered that in the chat as well, but she was very nice and added those in now if you want to copy and paste them.
Thank you, Ashley. That concludes our 2022 Landscape Summit. We thank you all for attending. We hope you enjoyed it. I know I certainly did. Thank you all for all the presenters and sharing your knowledge today. It was really incredible information, and it is appreciated. You will be receiving an email for feedback, and we encourage you to fill that out when you have the opportunity. In that survey, there will be an option to provide your name and email address if you're interested in joining the Landscape Committee. We meet the first Tuesday of every other month at 9 a.m. On Zoom, and our next meeting is Tuesday, April 5th. We encourage you to come. The more participants from the landscape community that we have, the better the county is, the better Valley Water is. So please sign up. We'd love to have you. We thank you all again, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care all.